Welcome again to Sahara TV, and with us to discuss the legal battle for the IPOP leader Nnamdi Kanu is Bruce Fain, the international lawyer and spokesperson to Nnamdi Kanu, the detained leader of the indigenous people of Biafra. Mr. Bruce Fain, welcome to Sahara TV.
Thank you.
Let's get your perspective. What's been the latest development with regards to Nnamdi Kanu's legal battle, considering the fact that the criminal proceedings in respect to the 7 count amended charges preferred against him and pending at the Federal High Court Division in Abuja, Nigeria, is due to continue from tomorrow. What's the latest with regards to development? Have you seen Kanu? Have you had access to him?
Well, I've spoken to his wife. No, I think that the latest that I received from the lead counsel, Fanny Ejiofor, is that Nigerians think I'm a spy for the United States, which is absurd. I criticize our own spy agencies every other day. Anybody can read my record. So I don't know. We're hopeful. We have a contempt motion outstanding against the government because they denied me access to Nnamdi counsel. Kanu, my counsel, his counsel earlier. And we also have an outstanding motion for the judge to specifically order, with my name in the order, that I be given a presence in the courtroom and access to Nnamdi Kanu. It seems to me quite clear that the obstacles the government is placing in the way of my meeting is because they have no case under international law. Otherwise, why? I'm not doing anything that's disruptive. I don't make scenes at the waiting room. I comply with all the orders, put names on list. I'm not bringing in any weapons or any electronic equipment. I'm just want to apply by the rules. Unless we have the rule of law, we're all going to lose. And we're not going to have, it will be nothing more than might makes right. So we don't know what's going to happen with that motion. We expect it will be decided tomorrow. Now, the court has set Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 3 days aside this week, for hearing the motion to dismiss all of the charges, basically arguing that none of the allegations and the amended charges allege an actual violation of Nigerian law. And if they did, the prosecution couldn't move forward because the way in which Nnamdi was detained, extraordinary rendition, kidnapping, torture, and his continuing solitary confinement without access to lawyers of his choice are themselves reasons to dismiss the case with prejudice, because there's a general principle of law that, a government shouldn't profit from its own crimes. And therefore, if a government commits a crime in obtaining control and detention over an individual, they shouldn't be able to prosecute. And in this case, although it's still somewhat cloudy what transpired in Kenya in the details, we certainly know this: there wasn't any extradition hearing. Nnamdi was never given an opportunity to respond to any of the allegations, to demonstrate how there wasn't any reason or cause for him to be extraordinarily renditioned to Abuja to face fraudulent charges. Now, what the details are, insofar as collusion between the government of Nigeria and the Kenyan authorities or Kenyan thugs, that's a little bit murky. But I suspect, because if the government of Kenya was not involved, they would have been outraged out of criminal activity on their own soil. And they would have been very aggressive in denouncing what happened. After all, it's not every day that a government tolerates foreigners coming on their sovereign territory and committing a crime. And let me give you just one example, and I may have mentioned it earlier, about Umaru Diktu. He was the fraudulent former minister who, in UK about 10 years ago, was captured, put in a cage, and there was an attempt to extraordinarily rendition him to Nigeria. And when the British authorities caught them, they not only prosecuted those who were involved, even though this was a Nigerian citizen, not a UK citizen like Nnamdi, but they broke relations with Nigeria for 2 years for this intrusion on UK sovereignty. Kenya, on the other hand, has been virtually silent about this. So I think the greatest suspicion is that somehow, probably someone as high up as President Kenyatta did a deal with President Buhari or Malami or someone, said, okay, here's our chance, and probably money passed under the table because that's how the Nigerians typically do business. And that's the explanation. But we still need discovery on that score, which hasn't been offered yet. After all, we can't make a complete defense of Nnamdi until we know exactly the details of how he was extraordinarily renditioned. And the government of Nigeria has not been forthcoming on that score at all.
Great. We received a copy of the letter that you wrote to the UK's government requesting the UK government involvement in this case. As a matter of fact, I have a copy of that letter here, where you insinuated or stated clearly that Kanu was kidnapped and tortured in Kenya, subjected to extraordinary rendition to Abuja, Nigeria, by the federal government of Nigeria, and he has been arbitrarily and indefinitely held in solitary confinement without access to necessary medical care, counsel of his choice, and subject to continuing torture in violation of international law and covenants. You also stated in that letter that at present, the United Kingdom has refrained from openly interceding with Nigerian authorities to protest the flagrant ongoing lawless maltreatment of one of its citizens. That's a serious indictment on the British government. Why, in your opinion, has the British government been a foot dragging as far as this matter is concerned? Is there a political undertone?
We're given to speculation here because most of these kinds of diplomatic back channels, don't make it to the media unless there's a leak, if you will. But again, I'm just drawing on basic background of how international relations typically operates. And my suspicion is the reason for the UK reticence is that there's some economic tie, some economic benefit that's passing one way or another. Could be purchase of arms, could be voting for loans from the IMF, who knows what it could be. But otherwise, it's inexplicable that the British would be so indifferent to having one of its citizens abducted, tortured, and extraordinarily renditioned into Nigeria. I mean, the British are not naive. They know what the Nigerian so-called legal system is, but it really isn't a legal system because it really is nothing but law parading as a jumble of political considerations with ulterior motives. I mean, I've experienced it myself on several occasions, and that's just wrong. And we're trying, to get the British more involved, in some sense, embarrass them. What's going on here? Now, we do know that the Nigerians have taken the position that only the president of Nigeria can authorize you to renounce your citizenship and walk away. And that, like in Iran, has the same, the mullahs in Iran also say that if you ever had Iranian citizenship, we have you forever, right? Which is a flagrant violation of human rights. Every individual has a right to disavow allegiance and go elsewhere. Fundamental. And so the Nigerians may be taking the position, well, since President Buhari didn't permit him to renounce his allegiance, he's still a Nigerian. He has a UK passport, so that seems a little bit odd. His UK passport, you're saying he's a Nigerian citizen. But it's exactly these kinds of behind the scenes dealings that are essential to understanding the full picture of what happened that are necessary to go forward and have a fair trial. And they say right now, all of this is being concealed. It's very important. Now, one of the things that at least we're guardedly optimistic about in these next 3 days is the judge may, and I would hope, would just dismiss the charges on one ground alone. The Nigerian criminal code is very clear that for acts that occur outside the territory of Nigeria, if they constitute the criminal offense, the Nigerian courts have no jurisdiction to adjudicate such crimes. And all of the crimes alleged in the amended charges occurred by transmissions by Radio Biafra from UK London, which is obviously a transmission outside of London. Moreover, you have to ask, do we really think UK, if they thought the transmissions were being utilized to promote terrorism, would just let the radio Biafra operate. Yeah, on its face, it's ludicrous, completely ludicrous. And then there's another fact too, I think, that undermines the government's case here, and that is, you may recall about 4 or 5 years ago, for about 4.5 years, the government of Nigeria, at the direction of President Buhari, just announced IPOB is a terrorist organization, right? No trial, nothing. We just decided you are. And they undertook a lobbying campaign through their information minister to try to convince all countries of the world, you need to list IPOB as terrorist. Now, almost 4.5 years later, the government of Nigeria has failed on every country in the world, not even the ones that would be susceptible to bribery, because we know that the Nigerian government would not be reluctant to pay a country money in order to say, hey, if you list IPOB, all right, $5 million, Sani Abacha style theft, okay? And they haven't succeeded anywhere, not any place at all. And so I think that shows they're desperate and running around trying to find out some excuse for their maltreatment of Nnamdi Kanu. Let me add that it really should be very, very painful to all Nigerian citizens. We now have the Nigerian government. They've basically punished Nnamdi Kanu for over 6 months, imprisoned under very, very harsh conditions. He hasn't had a trial. He hasn't been convicted of anything. Now, in civilized systems of law, you don't go to prison until after your trial, right? Not before. Here, they basically put him under the control of DSS, which is even harsher conditions than the general prison population. Every single day that elapsed, another human rights violation. Another day, you're detaining somebody, he hasn't had a trial yet. What is going on? And you call this a government of laws? I mean, that's a joke. And really, this is a principle that ought to be of concern to every Nigerian, whether it be Afrin, whether Yoruba, whether they're Fulani or whatever. Nobody's life is safe if the government can do whatever it wants to do, no evidence, walk into your home and say, you know what, you're now a criminal.
That's quite true. President Muhammadu Buhari had ruled out the option of pardoning the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, that's Nnamdi Kanu. During a recent interview he had with one of the TV channels in Nigeria, although he acknowledges the possibility of a political resolution, he believes that Nnamdi Kanu must answer for his actions over the years while he was out of the country. Do you agree with that sentiment of the president?
Well, the sentiment is wonderful. Why doesn't he act on it? You only can hold him accountable if you have a trial, where you actually have witnesses and evidence. No one is able to establish a crime simply by standing on a podium and announcing it. We all have safeguards that are trappings of court proceedings that prevent injustice, that prevent wrong decisions, cross-examination, right to counsel, right to call witnesses on your own behalf, right to make an argument, especially a right to an impartial arbitrator. Now, how to say that Buhari has any authority to announce, that Nnamdi Kanu is guilty would be like saying, well, Nnamdi Kanu can also be a judge in his own case and say, I'm innocent. No one would accept that. Who would permit either the prosecutor or the accused to be the decider? That's clearly not an impartial adjudicator. So let's hold President Buhari to his own standard. Okay, you said you wanted him to be held accountable. The way to do that is to go to court in a rule of law and put forth the evidence, put forth a defense, and have an impartial adjudicator decide. That's exactly what he has failed to do for over 6 months.
Now, let me get your view on these. Considering the fact that many, especially Nigerians, believe that there is a political undertone on the current as far as this Kanu's trial is concerned, is there a political solution to politically punctuated conflicts like this? Is there a recognized medium by which national governments confront disputes that have greater implications for national security, just like we have in this trial? What's your perspective on that?
Yes, there are certainly models that could be followed, and it takes goodwill on both sides. Let's face it, in politics, most everything is resolved by a compromise. Not just one side gets everything. And one recent example was the secession of South Sudan from Sudan. There was a long conflict there. There was a conflict in culture, a conflict in religion. It wasn't working out. Unfortunately, South Sudan, hasn't turned out to be what great, but that's anyway. But that was a way, despite what's happened in South Sudan, which is self-inflicted, it did resolve. They're no longer in war with the Sudan. But it means that there needs to be a fair and careful evaluation of the merits of both sides. And I will say this, and this is true really not only for Nigeria, but for all African countries. And it's not recognized with sufficient depth, I believe. All of the boundaries, virtually all, maybe Ethiopia and Liberia exception, but virtually every other boundary, including Nigeria, they were drawn by European despots in Berlin over a century ago. They weren't drawn for any benefit for the indigenous people. They're drawn because they had guns and they were going to take it over. What makes these boundaries so sacrosanct? You're saying that the British get to draw your boundaries with no input from you, really? And that's the boundaries you want to defend? So that's why I believe, although there's a prudential reason not to have every boundary up for grabs all the time, because you need some stability, there shouldn't be any sacredness by it. And we always hear this slippery slope argument. Well, if you prevent one secession, then the entire continent will become unglued. Well, when South Sudan seceded from Sudan, the entire continent did not become unglued. Every case is unique. Every case is different. It was said also when Bangladesh seceded from Pakistan in 1970, all of India is going to come unglued. The whole South Asia would come unglued. No, it didn't, because the cases are different and unique. The case of Biafra is a unique case. Every case in Africa really is, given the colonial heritage there. And so there needs to be a recognition. No, it doesn't mean the end of nation states. It means you have an adjustment, because the discrepancy between popular will and sentiment and culture from one people to another has become so acute that it's going to be preferable for everybody to just separate peacefully. You can have trade, you can have other cordial relations, but they got to have separate sovereigns. And there's nothing antithetical about that. But I underscore that every Nigerian should ask themselves, what is sacred about a boundary drawn by the British over a century ago with no input from a single African anywhere?
That's quite serious. Finally, just to round this up, because our time is fast running out. Considering the fact that in Nigeria there have been various reports criticizing the Nigerian government's handling of this trial so far, and looking at the legal challenges or legal hurdles surrounding the Nkadu's legal travails, and a possible purported indictment on those criminal charges. What will be next for the legal battle for Nnamdi Kanu in case the Nigerian government goes ahead to criminally indict him on those charges?
Well, we would go forward with our evidence. At least at present, if you look at the list of so-called witnesses and documents that the government has provided, it's really pathetic. It goes back near 7 years ago, 7 years ago. And the worry, at least that I have, because it's been true in other situations where tyrannical governments have prosecuted political figures, is that Nnamdi could be acquitted. They could dismiss all of his charges tomorrow, probably Thursday. And then the government says, okay, now we charge you with something new. Okay, no charge. So you're back to square one. You can always invent things. I mean, the things that they invented, doesn't exhaust all possibilities. And that's why it's important to get this on the international map. Nigerian government needs to know, and I underscore the government here. I don't believe that there's any necessary reason why the Fulani and the Reuben, the Igbo can't have satisfactory arrangements, even if they're separate sovereigns. We're all human beings. We all have DNA. The goal here isn't to be triumphalism, and kind of boast, well, we're better than you. It's try to get the best we can out of a messy situation. And I do believe that if the government is sincere and wants to sit down and say, okay, how can we resolve this? How can we have a transition that protects expectations and doesn't result in recriminations, revenge? We had a very famous president said, with a charity for all and malice towards none. We need to move forward together, and that's what needs to happen in these era of convulsions when we're trying to put them to rest.
Bruce Fain, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your insights and perspective as far as these matters and the issues are concerned. We hope we can do this again as the trial resumes tomorrow, and hopefully by the 28th we can do this another time.
Yes, wonderful. I appreciate you for inviting me. Have a wonderful afternoon.
You too, my brother. You too. Take care.
Okay.